Hello, and welcome to episode 11 of the Stone Age Gamer. Today's episode is called The Emulation Situation. Enjoy. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Stone Age Gamer podcast for the week of August 4th, 2014. My name is Chris. I'll be your host for the evening, and with me, as always, is the unlovable Dan Ryan.
I knew that one was coming to me that time. Good evening, everyone.
The unstoppable Dean DeFalco.
Yeah!
And the unpresent Mike Sheridan.
Castlevania.
Castlevania.
Yes. Yeah, Mike will not be joining us on account of he is about waist deep in vampire guts at the moment. He took his vampire slaying pretty literally and is now killing people with whips. He's probably not going to be back on the show because he's going to be in jail.
Yeah, that's not okay. You're
No.
not allowed to just go, no, officer, seriously, he was a vampire. Trust me, listen to my podcast. I know what I'm talking about.
We bought him the best lawyer $2.85 could buy, though.
He's got these glass jars of blue liquid he's throwing at people and trying to set on fire. It's bad.
However, when he does get arrested, I think I know a guy who can bail bond him out.
Oh!
Look at that, tying it all together.
Yeah, look at that. And there we go. That's our show, ladies and gentlemen. No, tonight we're gonna talk about some tournaments. After our usual, talking about what kind of games we've been playing, because tournaments are very interesting, and they've been getting a lot more attention lately than they have been. It seems to be one of those things that's been gaining steam over the years. But we're going to fire things off with our usual what we've been playing. So, Dan, let's start with you. What you been doing?
Well, as I am packing up my apartment still to make the trek cross country, there really hasn't been much time for gaming, so what I've been trying to get in is just some platinum trophy chasing in the Guacamelee Super Turbo Championship Edition and Lego Marvel for PS4, which is, I mean, they're both a ton of fun. We've talked about Guacamelee before, but the Lego Marvel game is, for my money anyway, the best of the Lego games so far. They're a lot of fun to play by yourself, but with kids, they're awesome. Like, my kids lose their minds when I can be Deadpool and running around and just being silly and goofy in the game, and funny stuff happens, and the characters look really cool, the environments look really cool, the voice acting, when there is voice acting, is really funny and engaging, and they absolutely love it. And I finally figured out that I can use my PS Vita not just as a second screen, but as a second controller. So, because I'm not shelling out $60 for another PS4 controller right now, now that I figured out how to get the Vita going as a second controller, I can play the game with my kids, which is a lot of fun now too. So we've just been running around trying to do that, go back through the story missions, get the rest of the bricks, and rescue Stanley in every level, and get all the stuff so I can get that platinum, because it matters to me for some reason.
Yes, it matters.
it's my phony internet points that I'm proud of. Look at my trophies.
Don't you have two beautiful children? Shut up! I got trophies.
They helped me get it. I don't know. It's one of those things. I don't have a lot of platinum trophies because I'm an adult with children. I don't have a lot of time to chase platinums. I've got, platinums in Guacamelee and one of the Tekken games, and Mickey's Castle of Illusion. I don't even think there was a platinum for that. I think it was just 100% completion or something. But DuckTales, I think. Just basically stuff I can play with my kids is what I get to platinum. So if anybody looks at my trophy list, you'll see a bunch of kids games.
I guess that's one way to do it.
Yeah, well, plus the achievements or the trophies in that, they're usually easier to get because they're for kids. So,
well, Dean, what have you been up to?
Good question. I don't know what I've been up to. I've been up to a lot of things. I've been down to a lot of things. I've been across a lot of things. But mainly, I've been playing some video games. Is that good enough?
Perfect.
Oh,
Perfect.
okay.
Podcast
All right.
over.
Cool.
Good night,
Great.
everybody.
Great. No, I've been I went back. I picked up my Game Boy, my original Game Boy, sort of. I have a modded one with like a backlit screen. So at night now, I've been playing through Picross because I like Picross. I like puzzle games. I like to relax at night and not play anything where my heart has to be pounding out of my chest like Dota 2 because that game's going to give me a severe heart attack one day.
So you're talking about Mario's Picross for original Game Boy.
Correct, I am.
That is a phenomenal game and one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorites on the original Game Boy, and I love it to death. It's so good. And the fact that I have a backlit screen that I could play it on is a huge plus because now I can kind of play it whenever I want then. I don't have to, wait till sunlight or turn on a gigantic lamp or, turn the lights on in my room. I can just kind of do it whenever I want.
You can also play this game on 3DS.
The Picross?
Yeah,
When did
Mario's
it release?
Picross is on a 3DS Virtual Console. It's pretty early actually, and it's only like $4 or something. It's well worth it.
It might have just slipped by, and I might have missed it when it came out. Because I remember looking through the catalog a couple months ago, and I just might have totally went past it by accident. Yeah, I'm definitely going to download that then because that would be much easier on my 3DS than it would be on my Game Boy. As much as I love my Game Boy, I can't recharge the battery. So if I put the thing down for a week and a half, half the battery is gone. So yeah.
There's also there's actually a handful of Picross games on there because besides Mario's Picross for Game Boy, they have Picross E, which are just new Picross puzzles. The presentation's kind of lacking. It's very very sterile. But it's just more Picrosses, and it's pretty nice. There's 3 of them, I think. So there's 3 whole other Picross games available on the 3DS.
Sweet deal. Thank you for bringing that up. Now I have all these wonderful puzzle games to play. Besides that, what else have I been doing? I have gone forward in Shovel Knight quite a bit. I got to Plague Knight, and I beat him. That was kind of difficult. I mean, you beat the game, didn't you, Chris?
No, actually, I haven't been able to play it in like 2 weeks.
Oh, I'm
'cause I've been
sorry.
very busy, but I'm hopeful that I'll get to play it maybe a little bit tomorrow night.
Did you get up to Plague Knight?
Plague Knight. Yes, I think I killed Plague Knight.
He was
I
a
don't
pain
know
in the
who else I've
butt.
beaten.
Yeah, he's weird because I started noticing this game has a very even keel difficulty level as you're just progressing along. So the first bosses are kind of sort of easy, and then all of a sudden they start getting new mechanics and stuff that the bosses themselves. It's not just they're jumping up and down or whatever. Whatever world they're in, it reflects directly onto the boss. So I was fighting this guy called Plague Knight, and the whole level was this zombie underworld mad scientist type level, and it was super cool. Like, he throws potions and everything at you. There's little fireballs coming across. He morphs these what do you call them, little beakers full of toxic gas, and if he throws a bomb at him and it connects, it like blows up half the map or whatever. It's really really cool. That was a lot of fun. It was a really cool boss fight, and it got really close to dying too, so it kept me on my toes. It only took me 2 tries to do, so I guess it wasn't all that hard, but it was still challenging. Like, it went right down to the wire. And that's the cool thing about Shovel Knight. I feel like it's challenging enough to, make you sweat, but it's not so challenging where you just want to throw the 3DS at something, which is, it's nice because, you don't want something that is so frustrating that you don't want to play anymore. That's not enjoyable. You want something where it's challenging, but you could still beat it. Look at, was it Ghosts and Goblins? That game's cool. It's got really cool, enemies and stuff. The music's neat, but the game is unbeatable, So what's the fun of playing it if it's impossible to get to the end?
That's what Game Genie is for.
Well, you know what? Not everyone has a Game Genie, Dan. All right? Not everyone has that.
Well, maybe
know what,
everyone
Dean?
should.
Get good, all right?
Oh, I'm sorry. Have you beaten Ghosts and Goblins in 3 lives?
Not in 3 lives, but I've beaten it.
In how many lives?
Just be better at life.
I'm not sure how many lives it's taken me to beat it, but I have definitely. All right, wait. All right, I'm thinking Super Ghouls and Ghosts. That's the only one in that series that I have beaten. That's the Super Nintendo one. I have and can beat that game. I don't ever want to do it again. In fact, beating it through the first time is fine. Beating it through the second time and having to have this stupid effing goddess bracelet, and then in order to get to that last boss, that's where I call it quits. Because the goddess bracelet, if you get yourself the crossbow, and then you just kind of know how the levels work, and you're good. You're pretty well taken care of. Because you get yourself the crossbow and the right armor, and you don't make any dumb mistakes. The crossbow can take out the stupid firebrand red demons. It can take those guys out fairly well because it's a homing shot. Once you have that and you're careful, you can pretty much take down the rest of the game. The last two bosses aren't incredibly tough as long as you know their patterns and play incredibly defensively. The problem is you get to the next room and the girls are like, I left my bracelet like somewhere. And you can't get the last boss without using this bracelet. Sorry. Probably should have told you that a long time ago, seeing as I can communicate with you via telepathy or whatever the hell's going on at the end of the game. So you start back over again, and you gotta get all the good armor, and you get the goddess bracelet, and it's this stupid fairy thing turns into a bracelet, and it's just this fucking useless fire shot thing that just comes out, a white flame thing that comes right out of the front of you and does not travel very far, and it only shoots straight. It's like the lances, but way worse. It is easily the worst weapon in the game. It's a complete pain in the ass to use. And you got to get through the hardest level in the game, at least just the hardest level in the game, the last one, with the damn goddess bracelet. And you got to beat the damn boss with the goddess bracelet too, which is insanely difficult because it only shoots straight and like 6 feet in front of you. So you got to avoid his fire breath, his laser eyes, and his crazy death shot, all while like jumping back and forth trying to get the flip shot in, so that if you do a double jump, when you do the double jump and you do an attack after the double jump while you're in midair, Arthur will do a flip and it actually makes your attack twice as powerful. So trying to hit those shots that you can actually accomplish something, and then you have to fight the final boss, who is 2 screens tall, and you got to fight him with this stupid fucking goddess bracelet, which is ridiculous. And no, I beat the game once. I pretend that, the girl is just like, oh, I was a dream the whole time. You're actually a king somewhere in your sleep. And then I stopped playing the game saying, yeah, Ghosts and Goblins was the best game ever. Anyway, so you were saying?
Besides that, how did we get onto that? Like, Shovel Knight, right?
I gotta get this game. Yeah.
I'm sorry. You know what, Dan? You know what? I bought Ollie Ollie, so I'm challenging you to buy Shovel Knight.
You got to get a Wii U first.
No, you could get it on the 3DS. You could get it on Steam.
You had to make a $7 purchase.
It was $12. I bought it on Steam.
Oh, fair enough. Even so, I still have to lay out like $300 for Shovel Knight.
No, you could buy it on Steam, and it's $15.
Yeah, but I don't even know if my computer can run Shovel Knight.
It's 8-bit. If it can't run it, your computer needs to go jump in the garbage.
Shovel Knight's far more complex than it looks.
Yeah, I don't think it's that physically demanding.
Game. I don't know. I might be able to.
Dan's computer has a pull start. All right, it's gas powered.
Oh, okay, all right. Sorry, I forgot it was powered by many gerbils.
It's like Mad Max and shit over here.
Do you remember him from a few weeks ago? He puts Prodigy discs in order to communicate with us through Skype.
Totally forgot. Totally forgot that.
Who are you paying for those?
I don't know. Somebody just keeps taking my money every month.
And I have internet access, so
I have internet, so it's not very fast internet. I'm rocking my 7 megabytes down, but
All right, well, I'm going to finish us off with the most extreme game out of all of us. This week I took a trip out to the local game store, Digital Press. I looked around and I found a couple of I found a couple of Atari games. I don't have a whole lot of money to spare these days, so if I'm going to spend something, it's going to be a very, very minute sum. I picked up a game called Airlock, which my friend Joe and I were talking about a while ago. I haven't had a chance to play it yet. I also picked up a different label variation of Maze Craze because I'm a bad person and I buy label variants. But it was only like $3, so leave me be. But the main game, the main attraction, the best thing ever is skateboarding. Not skateboarding, skateboarding, because they were too extreme to include the
Bro,
G.
yeah, that's when you know you got a good game, when it's IN and then an apostrophe next to it.
That's right. Now, I don't know if you guys have seen the cover for this game. It's a kid, a 90s kid, and you can tell it's the 90s because of the rad colors that are on his shorts. They're like hot pink and fluorescent yellow.
Are they jams?
It's a little difficult to tell because it's not a very good drawing.
Ah, well,
It's this is not a photograph, it's a drawing. It's in front of a picture of a. It looks like he's skateboarding on a highway of some sorts because there's a street and a truck behind him, and the truck looks like it says one way on it. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. I don't know what a one-way truck would carry besides being an entire truck full of one-way signs. And then
we
it's
can
got,
hope.
we can only hope. I mean, somebody's got to cart those things around. But the thing is, the background is it looks like a photograph that's askew. It's like tilted a little bit to the left, and then there's this rad 90s Saved by the Bell background thing going on. So you know it's extreme because it's not straight like a square. It's a
Oh,
little off kilter. Plenty of fluorescent colors and a very very thick 90s, well 80s style skateboard because this was released in 1987. So yeah, this is late 80s. This
Oh,
is the 90s before
Chris,
they were
I
90s.
found it. It's fantastic. I love every second of it. Thank you so much. The
One of the other great things about this, I have to point out, is that this was developed by Absolute Entertainment, and the kid in the picture is wearing a T-shirt with their logo on it.
Good product
ooh.
placement.
Oh yeah, it's hot. I mean, they were able to, because that's what the cool kids were doing back then. They were wearing T-shirts with Absolute Entertainment's logo on it.
I love his fingerless gloves. That's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, that really ties it together. The sunglasses are pretty nice too. And I think he has a flat top, but he's a white kid with red hair.
Oh yeah,
So,
he's a ginger, so it's fantastic. Everything
Dan,
about this is
have
good.
you ever had a flat top as a white dude with red hair?
No, no, I have not. It's just not. It's not a look those of us of the more redheaded persuasion should rock ever. Like what concerns? I'm looking at this image here too, and what concerns me is the message that this is sending to the children. Because this kid, he first of all, he's out on a fucking highway. That's stupid.
On a skateboard? Yeah, that's
On a
pretty dumb.
skateboard, if you're not skitching, which is where you grab the bumper of a vehicle and ride behind it, which is insanely fucking dangerous. But if
True.
you're not doing that, you really don't need to be anywhere near vehicles while you are skateboarding.
Well,
Um,
he's also, it's worth pointing out that not only is he on the highway, but he appears to be airborne headed towards where this truck is going. So
well,
this kid is
yeah,
not
that's
long for the world.
no,
Bro,
that's
he's
what I was gonna say
extreme.
because like one, not only is he, on the highway where he shouldn't be. Two, the trajectory of this artwork, he is in the air on the path towards the truck. And three, he doesn't have a helmet or knee pads or elbow pads, or this kid is going to die. There is
Well,
no way
look,
around it.
he,
30 seconds after this picture was drawn, this kid died. A horrible, splattery death all over. And this poor guy driving this truck full of one-way signs around, he had to go home and tell his family what happened at work that day and why daddy doesn't have a job anymore because he killed some little shit that came off of some ramp somewhere, I imagine, with an Easter Island head looking skateboard. This kid sucks a lot.
Dan, thank
And
you
this-
for painting this hellscape of a video
he
game
is-
cover.
Well,
well,
see,
you know what you
I
don't
used
know,
to
Dan?
skate,
You
and
don't know.
it gives us a bad name.
Well, you have a bad name in general, but
Sure, but
what you don't know is like, see what's behind that little picture frame there? This could be a
yeah,
world of pillows. All right, there could be a giant mountain of pillows, like 30 feet tall, right in front of this truck. Maybe the one-way truck is actually made of foam, right? Maybe
that?
this guy is driving a foam truck. Maybe it's all just a bad trip. Maybe this kid's actually in a hospital bed, right? Now he doesn't
This
know any
kid's in a
better.
hospital bed because he got hit by a fucking truck because he was skateboarding in the street irresponsibly.
He's
Where are his
hallucinating
parents?
this whole thing because
Because
he's
he's
got like
tripping on acid, that's why.
Yeah, he had like he drank a bunch of Clorox or something, and now and all his hair fell out. So he's imagining that he has a flat top because he's a redhead. He can't actually have a flat top, but everybody knows that everybody cool in 1987 had a flat top. So he drank a bunch of Clorox, and now he's in a hospital bed dying. And he's imagining this world of foam and pillows where he gets to wear super extremely cool shorts and have a flat top and still keep his red hair.
And actually, not for nothing, the thing I'm most concerned with is his giant yellow socks that he's got rolled down. Like, I don't know if any
You
of
think
our
those are
listeners.
wigwams?
Oh shit! If any of our listeners grew up in the '80s, as Chris and I did, the fact that there are teenagers today that are like, "No, I'm bringing it back." Fuck that shit. Let it die. It was so bad. It
And
was
it's
so
even
bad.
worse now.
It really is.
You
Like
know,
it's
like in the
not
80s,
good.
there was a lot of cocaine in the 80s.
A whole lot.
There was an
Just
excuse, you
mountains,
know?
mountains of cocaine.
And now kids are looking at this like, yeah, hot pink knee socks. Let's fucking do it, you know?
Done.
No.
There's
I
not
bet you this
coke.
kid. I bet you this kid has shitty lightning bolts shaved into the side of his shitty haircut.
Oh, absolutely. Because he's extreme. You know
Have you?
why?
I
Because
bet you
there's
he's
no
got a
G at
rat
the end of
tail.
Borden.
No,
That's
there's
how you
not.
know. That's how you fucking know.
He's got a little rat tail behind him. Oh, this kid sucks. I'm glad he's gonna die. I really
Oh
am.
my god.
This kid's the worst.
So the game itself.
Are we actually gonna talk about the game, or are we just gonna say fuck
On
this
the-
kid and end it?
On the
I
Atari
mean-
2600, I can't imagine how extreme and aggro it got.
Oh, it's nuts. All right, it's actually not a bad game, believe it or not. It's made by David Crane, who we've talked about on the show before. He's the guy behind Pitfall and A Boy and His Blob, and this was one of his better efforts back when David Crane was still doing stuff. Because once he moved past the Atari 2600, it seemed like he didn't really have his shit together. I don't know. Back in the Atari 2600 days, David Crane did some pretty cool stuff, and this is a decent skateboarding game. It's kind of told from a top, yeah, told the intense story of skateboarding and this dumbass kid with a rat tail. It's got a top down perspective, and you're on a skateboard, and you just basically roll around this. I think it's supposed to be a neighborhood or something, and there's a highway all the way up at the top where you have to kind of avoid getting hit by cars, and there's pipes that you can ride through only if you hit them at the exact right pixel or something. It's not very easy to nail everything down because you're on once you get on the skateboard, you start going forward and nothing really stops you until you hit a wall and fall off. And you can press you can change your directions, but it kind of does this weird way of looping itself around, so it's pretty unwieldy to change directions. So doing stunts and stuff isn't the easiest thing in the world. But you have a time limit. I think it's like 8 minutes or something, and you just kind of roll around doing stunts and trying to get a high score. And the whole time you're cruising along, it's got this little music playing. It's not back when we did the music podcast. We did some the Pitfall 2 music, which was really impressive for an Atari 2600 game to have music. This also has music, but not as impressive as Pitfall 2. It's just this really simple, repetitive bleep and bloop thing, whereas Pitfall 2 kind of sounded like almost like something that would have come out of an NES, like it was relatively complex in the way it was put together. This is just there's little tiny bops and whatnot. It's not great, but it's kind of funny and very catchy. It'll get stuck in your head. But yeah, unfortunately, the game itself doesn't have as much to say as the cover art, which is truly remarkable and will most likely be in the show notes. But that's what I've been playing this week. Skateboarding. That's what I'm talking about.
But you made time. You
Made,
found the time
that's right.
for
Made it
skateboard.
happen. That and I did spend I did spend way too much time playing Punch Out the other night. I plan on being part of this streaming thing that Dean's doing. We'll talk about it later in the show, but we're going to do some kind of a streaming event, and I was going to play through all three of the Punch Out games. So I'm talking to Dean, and I said, and we're trying to figure out the best way to play Punch Out because now I haven't played the NES Punch Out in a little while. I mean, obviously I play it fairly frequently, but I haven't seriously tried to play it on one of the more modern consoles in a while because of button lag. That game, especially when you get to Tyson or Mr. Dream, you need really really fast reflexes. You in order to beat that guy, you just need to be fast on your feet. So I haven't been able to really beat him in a while because on the Wii Virtual Console, I couldn't get past him. On the Wii U Virtual Console, whose NES emulation is unbelievably bad, just unforgivably awful. It's far worse than the Wii's emulation was, and it has really, really bad button lag. Now, on the Wii U Virtual Console version, I can't get past Soda Popinski. On the Wii Virtual Console version, it is insanely difficult, but I can get to Mr. Dream. And I'm thinking to myself, all right, let me see what I can do. Because for the purposes of streaming, obviously on a CRT, it's going to be a little bit different to do a whole streaming event thing. So I bust out the Wii U, I turn it into Wii mode, I go, I put in the password, I get to Mr. Dream, I try him a couple of times, and I can't get past like one or two punches because he does that whole flurry in the beginning where one uppercut knocks you down in one hit. Eventually, I got to the point where I could start dodging some of them, and I did okay. I actually made it past his opening flurry a couple of times and got to the point where, he can't knock me down in a single punch anymore, but I still lost. And I was exhausted. I was up so much later than I needed to be, but I was getting angrier and angrier at the game because I was like, no, I can make it past the opening flurry, which means I can beat this guy. I can fucking do this. I didn't lose my touch. I used to be able to beat this guy every single time. I'm not getting too old to do this. Right, so I'm playing and I'm playing and I'm getting so angry at myself and I'm getting angry at the game and I'm like, fuck. And eventually I just give up and I'm getting ready to go to bed because I'm beat. I'm so tired at this point. I'm seeing park benches run across my living room because I'm imagining all kinds of shit. I can't my brain is fried and I think to myself, no, if I go to bed now, not only does the game win, but I'm never gonna fall asleep because I'm fucking angry. So I go down to my basement. I plug in my NES, I dig out a copy of Punch Out, I put in the 007373596 code for the 300,000th time of the night. But this time I put it directly in on my CRT TV, took Mike Tyson down without getting knocked down a single time on my first try. So I didn't lose my shit. I just proved that the Wii U Virtual Console has horrible button lag. It's not in my imagination. It is absolutely unforgivable. The Wii Virtual Console's better and it looks nicer, and there's always going to be a little bit of button lag when going, HDMI and HD screens and all that jazz, but at least I didn't lose my touch, and I spent way too much time doing it. But yes, I can still demolish Punch Out, no problem, as long as I'm doing it on a CRT. So we're gonna have some fun on this streaming thing where I try to figure out the best way to play this game so that I can actually beat it without too much button lag.
Well, hopefully we'll have some stuff prepared beforehand, not just throw you in and be like, yeah, just figure it out. Dude,
Yeah, go for it. Although it is going to be interesting because I have not played Punch Out Wii since it came out, and that game is fantastic. It's really, really, really good. But I haven't really messed around with it since, so I'm going to be flying by the seat of my pants on that one. Punch Out and Super Punch Out I have basically memorized. I'll be able to beat those games till the day I die. But anyway, that's what I've been playing. Sorry that went on a little bit long.
That's okay. Are you playing them with wired controllers or wireless?
Well, the Wii U doesn't have any wired controllers.
There's nothing you can plug into it?
Not at the moment, no. I mean, you can plug in the Pro controllers, but they don't communicate via the plug. It just charges them. They're always going to communicate
Okay.
via wireless. Now, they have the GameCube adapter coming out,
Right.
which when Maryland Smash Brothers comes out, and those are 100% wired controllers. And so that's theoretically a possibility, but I don't think that the wireless signal is the problem because one of the most impressive things about the Wii U that it doesn't get nearly enough credit for is the low latency of the gamepad screen. There is no delay between what happens on the gamepad screen and your TV screen. It is ridiculous. But there is also just an innate level of button lag in just about anything on an HD TV, unless the games are really programmed around it. So any old
Right.
games you're playing, like through emulation, be it PlayStation, Xbox, or whatever, that weren't designed with HD TVs in mind, there's always going to be a certain level of button lag, and that comes more from the HDMI signal than and the refresh rates of modern televisions than anything else. What's weird about that whole thing is that and the reason I know it's the emulation on the NES games is that on the gamepad screen itself, there's button lag. As in, I'm looking at this screen, I'm pressing a button, and then the thing happens instead of pressing a button and it instantly happens. And that's on the game screen itself. And this similar
Right.
emulation process is also wrong with NES games on the 3DS Virtual Console, where there is literally no excuse for it.
No,
Because
there isn't. Yeah.
I'm playing, like, for example, the Wii U, it'll if I'm looking at the gamepad screen, it's going, between what's happening, pressing the button to the television and then back to the gamepad. I understand how that's the way that works because that's where the console is. So whatever button lag is on the television, it's going to be the exact same button lag on the gamepad screen. But on the 3DS, there's no excuse for there to be any button lag at all whatsoever because there is no relay going anywhere. But if I have Punch Out on my 3DS Virtual Console and I cannot beat that game on 3DS because there's button lag, which
Yeah.
is psychotic. And it's because they're using the same damn shitty emulation that they're using on the Wii U Virtual Console, and it's unacceptable, and it makes me relentlessly angry because they got it so right with the Wii Virtual Console, minus things like save states. But the Wii Virtual Console is you've never seen NES games look this good before. They're flawless when they're up on the Wii Virtual Console, especially on an HD TV. The original Wii hooked up through component video cables, the button lag is very minimal. And obviously on really difficult things like Punch Out, especially towards the end, when it really requires pinpoint accuracy, that's always going to be a problem. But 85 to 90% of the other games, it's never an issue because the lag is so minuscule and the graphics are so crisp and sharp. The colors are incredibly bright. And when they moved it over to the Wii U Virtual Console, they're using some sort of filtering system, which boggles my mind because the games aren't nearly as sharp, even though this is playing through HDMI as opposed to component, but the games aren't anywhere near as sharp. The games don't fill up as much of the screen. They're shrunk down a little bit and have a little bit of a border, which you would think would cause them to look sharper, but they don't. And because of this stupid filter that they're using, the games have longer button lag, and even games like Super Mario Brothers become insanely more difficult than they have any right to be. And it's my biggest complaint about the Wii U in general is the shitty emulation of NES games. And considering that they don't have all the systems that the Wii Virtual Console had, they don't have N64, they don't have Sega Genesis, Sega Master System, Commodore 64, TurboGrafx 16, Neo Geo, Arcade. These were all readily available on the Wii's Virtual Console, and some of them still can be, but you got to switch into Wii mode, and you can't use the gamepad, you can't use off TV play, you have to use a Wii remote and a classic controller to do this stuff. It's cumbersome. It's a better experience, but it's cumbersome. It should all be available in the Wii U menu, and it's inexcusable that this is being handled as poorly as it is. My head spins, and obviously, since I just ranted about it for God knows how long, I obviously give a crap about it. But I digress.
Well, no, it's an important topic to cover, considering where our hearts kind of lie with the retro gaming community, and having grown up through that. When you buy a modern system and are expecting a flawless experience that I'm willing to pay for, when there are free, sketchy legality but free options that run better, it's inexcusable. I
It
mean,
is. You're
that's
absolutely
just
right.
not okay.
Yeah. And I was fine with paying these prices for Wii Virtual Console games because they were handled with so much love and care. They were put together so well on the Wii Virtual Console. And and it's strange. It's just NES games. Super NES games run great on Wii U. They look stellar. They are bright and crisp. They look as good as, if not better than they did on the Wii Virtual Console. I would say probably about the same. And then when you see the Game Boy Advance emulation that they've done is really something special because I've been playing through. Obviously, I haven't played it in a couple of weeks, but I've been playing through Metroid Fusion on the Wii U Virtual Console, and the Game Boy Advance games are not easy to emulate on a television because of all the weird tricks that they used to make Game Boy Advance games look good on the awful Game Boy Advance screen that wasn't backlit. So there's all these weird visual touches that they added to those games. If you had a 3DS and you were part of the ambassador program before they did the price drop, that you got 10 free Virtual Console Game Boy Advance games, and they look awful on there. Like there's lots of motion blur, and the games are all very dull, and that's just because that's just a straight emulation. So they actually ran some filtering things and put some effort into these games, and they look great. On the Wii U, it's really impressive, and why they can't take that kind of love and care to something as seminal and even system selling worth as Mario 3, it boggles my mind. And I mean, Mario 3 is a selling point. Having that available on your system for $5 is actually something that parents will buy when they see that they can do that for their kids. They're like, oh, they can play when they're done with these other Mario games. There's six more Mario games that I can download for a couple dollars a piece. That's outstanding. It adds to the value of the system. And if Nintendo had any fucking brains, sorry, they have lots of brains. They're just diseased, crazy brains sometimes. Um, if they paid more attention to this stuff, they could use it as a better selling point and would really be a good way to move systems. It was a big missed opportunity with the original Wii because there's so much amazing content available on the original Wii for download for relatively inexpensive prices, and some bizarre games, some amazing games, some games that have never been released in America before. I mean, there's the TurboGrafx 16 version of Street Fighter 2 is available on there. I downloaded it just to see what the hell it was like because it's an interesting curiosity and it was only like $5. So sure, why not try that out?
And there's
Um,
no way you can find, because that was a Turbo Duo game, which if you can even find a Turbo Duo to have the CD-ROM attachment, if you can then find a copy, it's relatively expensive.
it is, and
You're
it's not a
certainly
very
not going to find it for $5.
no, hell no. And it's not a great port of the game. I mean, it's
No,
an
it's
import
terrible.
title to begin, but it's not it's playable and it's really interesting because the TG16 only had two face buttons. So mapping Street Fighter 2, like officially Capcom did this and they made it run on that system. It was very impressive. Sounds really weird, but I digress. There's so much great content on there, and this stuff is essentially available to them. They would just need to take the entire Wii shop and put it on the Wii U eShop, similar to the way they took the DSi shop, um, all the DSiWare stuff, and just put it on the 3DS eShop. If they could do a similar thing from point A to point B, their eShop would be full of some of the best retro games ever and some really amazing stuff. And the way the eShop works, how it highlights different things all the time, there's amazing things that could be done with all this, and instead they're kind of sort of nickel and diming us by quote unquote upgrading the games to run on the Wii U Virtual Console with save states and stuff. And that stuff is very nice, but when I'm paying an extra dollar to upgrade a game I already spent $5 on, like let's say in honor of Mike, Castlevania, I have Castlevania on my Wii Virtual Console, and since I have that, if I go to the Wii U eShop, I have the opportunity to upgrade it for a dollar, which means that I can download the Wii U version of the game, which includes save states and everything else. But the game is going to run through that shitty NES emulation that they have on the Wii U Virtual Console, thus rendering the game nigh on unplayable, especially for retro heads like us who know these games inside and out. And I'm paying an extra dollar so that I can use save states. I'm not okay with that.
I'm
It's
paying an extra dollar for a lesser experience.
exactly. I'm paying an extra dollar to have quality taken away. And now, granted, it's not taken away because I can always just flip back over to Wii mode and grab a different controller and play it that way. But it's not the full featured experience that I want. It's not why I bought the system. I want to be able to take all those games and go upstairs and play them in bed on my gamepad without any interruptions. That's one of the best things about the Wii U. And that should be the case with all of my virtual console stuff. I cannot fathom why they haven't been able to grab stuff from point A and just dump it into point B. Besides the fact that they think that they can squeeze an extra dollar out of everybody to buy Super Mario Brothers again. But then we're going to cross-buy territory, and that's a conversation that I could spend an inordinate amount of time on, and I've already spent an inordinate amount of time on this already. So we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to grab myself a little beverage, and we're all going to sit down for a second, and we're going to keep talking about the topic of emulation and all that other jazz.
Excellent. I'm going to grab a beer.
I want to do the
Excellent.
same thing. Fuck you guys. I'm going now.
We'll be back. And we're back. So we're going to basically pick up where we left off, and we're going to put our regular feature topic off for another day because we've jumped into something here and we want to see it through to the end. So we're discussing emulation on modern consoles and what's good and what's bad about them. I just wanted a long rant about Nintendo on the Wii U as opposed to the Wii, and Dan had something to add. So let's just jump right back in. Dan, what's going on?
Well, the thing that really drives me nuts about the emulation topic is that I would love to give my money to the people that deserve it. And I try to do as much as I can. But take the PS4 for example. PS4 comes out and on their store, on the PSN store, there are games that I can purchase, but they are only PS4 games. I cannot purchase anything from PS3, PS2, or PS1. Now, on the PlayStation 3, I can play PS3 games and I can play PS1 discs. It will not play, the version that I have will not play the PS2 disc. But on their store, at least, I can go and I can pick up PS2 games, PS1 games. I can buy them all digitally and have them, and that's great. The problem that I have with that, though, is that none of that has transferred over to the PS4. So in my living room currently, I've got my PS3 hooked up and I've got my PS4 hooked up. Now, I know that's a little bit of first world problem. Like, oh, I have two really awesome video game systems hooked up to my television. You know, that's the very epitome of first world problems. But it speaks to what I think is a larger misstep that companies are taking when they go into the planning stages of modern consoles, is that there are those of us who want to play these older games. We want the games that we've played before. If I'm feeling in the mood to play Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 because I just happened to talk to my friend from college that day, and that was the game that we used to play when we were in college, I have a few options. I can't play it on my PS4. That doesn't work. If I was not one of the people who had a PS3 previously, I either have to pull out my PlayStation 1 console and the disc if I still have it, or I can emulate it illegally and play it perfectly, if not better, than when it came out on the original PlayStation. There are emulator programs out there that run games at a higher frame rate with smooth graphics, enhanced colors, everything looks better, it plays crisper, it locks a frame rate in, it takes care of so many of the problems, and it literally costs you nothing. Now, where I see that as a huge misstep is that the technology is there. It is possible to do these things, yet Sony and Nintendo and Microsoft are choosing not to make these experiences available, leaving people to sometimes have no choice but to look for other means to get it. I mean, let's face it, there are certain games out there that a lot of us are never going to get a chance to play. I've never played Earthbound. I'm not going to spend $150 to play Earthbound. That's just not happening.
When you get
now.
a Wii U, you will play Earthbound because
Right.
it's on the Wii U Virtual Console, and like I said, the Super Nintendo games work great on there.
Right. So I can jump in and play that. But there are other games that a lot of people haven't played that you still just don't have access to. You don't have the opportunity to play it, or the experience that they're offering is so shitty. You know, like you said, with I think your Mike Tyson's Punch Out example is a perfect description of what can go wrong there. A lot of these older games require a very precise timing, that we are either used to, or the game was developed for. It was developed for a very specific set of features that can be emulated. It is possible, but the major companies are choosing to ignore that.
Well,
and I just see them as kind of shooting themselves in the foot that way.
Well, I got to draw the line a little bit there, because I've had a decent amount of time trying to run emulations, and while I do own a good amount of the games that I try to emulate, there's a certain amount of risk you're taking with trying to run the games perfectly. I mean, there's a good amount of games that run good, I could say, at best, but a lot of the times, these configurations that your modern-day PC has doesn't work with whatever the Nintendo was running back then. You're going to have to tweak it a lot to get things to run really, really nice, and this can vary from game to game. Just for example, I was playing Super Punch-Out, and without doing anything for it, you can pop in Super Punch-Out into an SNES emulator, and it runs fine. You can't do the same thing with Super Mario RPG. If you try to run that game any way, shape, or form, there's frame rate stutter, it lags, the audio is off, and you have to tweak it to no end to try and get the damn thing to run. Also, it's going to vary from PC to PC, with what's going to run right, how, where are you going to get these ROMs from and everything. And it's a very, very big legal gray area about, what you can do. Essentially, what the rule is, if you have a physical copy of this game, you can go ahead and find a ROM and download it, because you don't want to, hurt your copy of your original, or, if you don't have the system anymore, you can do that. But it's still very kind of touch and go there. But again, what it comes down to is the hardware configurations, and I don't believe there's any actual hardware configuration that's perfect for running these ROMs. The good thing about what these companies are trying to do 95% of the time, save for maybe a lot of the Wii U stuff going on with the NES, is that they're trying to get these games to run to the best of their abilities, at their apex. And we're talking about developers doing this. This isn't, your everyday average Joe, me, you, Chris, whatever, trying to get this to run and tweak it in. This is an actual person that has a degree in doing this and is trying to get this to run to the best of his ability. And I mean, is that worth $5? Yeah, I do think that's worth $5 a lot of the time. Now, I get what you're saying, Dan. Sometimes they do a really shitty job, and, those people should probably have their fingers cut off, because if they're going to put the effort into, making the game work, make it run right. Don't make it, don't give us an unfinished product that doesn't run good, because it's only going on to one system. It's not like the emulators, where I can understand if that doesn't work right, because I have a gaming rig. Someone else might have a laptop. Someone else might have a 15-year-old PC they're trying to run this on. Nothing's the same when it comes to computers. But a PS3, it's almost always the same hardware, save for maybe, some of, like, say, a PS3, they've gone through, 8 different versions before they finally closed up shop and went on to the PS4. That's the difference. But, yeah, essentially, it's more or less the same stuff. So That's what I'm trying to get at, is that the PC stuff isn't always going to work right. Especially I've noticed, a lot of the stuff with Sega and Super Nintendo, when you're going back that far, it's a crapshoot. The PS1 stuff I've noticed can work a little bit better, especially if you have a physical disc, because these emulators will play your physical disc if you pop it in your DVD-ROM or CD-ROM or whatever. And I've enjoyed Final Fantasy IX that way, because I just recently acquired a PS1, but before that, I popped into the computer and it worked great. Crash Team Racing, one of my favorite racing games, I wasn't able to play because I didn't have a PS1, but I had the CD still, popped it in the computer, and I was able to enjoy that. I mean, hell, I was able to do multiple save states and, load it right up whenever I wanted. So, I mean, what I'm saying is, you can go ahead and get the emulators to work to an extent, but again, you're kind of wading into a very legal gray area. I'm not going to say moral,
No, sure, sure.
but
And that's really, that's really, I think, kind of my point there, though, is that, we're talking about, I mean, the teams that are developing these emulators, I can't imagine are 60-person teams getting paid very well for their work. These are fans that are passionate about these things and want to bring them to the general public. And you're right, with computer systems varying and spec and hardware, and you can never lock in what somebody's going to have in their computer, because that could change, week to week. If you're real heavy into it, you can always tweak or change or add or whatever. If you've got some people that are willing to do the homebrew and can do a damn fine job of it, if I can get an emulator on my computer and pop a PS2 disc into my computer and play it, why can't I do that on my PS4?
no, you're right. You're right. I mean,
And that's really where it comes down to for me, is why is this functionality not here?
I mean, to be honest, we're getting into the point of, what a company wants to get you to get dragged in. Because to be honest, if we're looking from it from a business standpoint, Sony doesn't want you going back to play old games. They want you to go in and play their new stuff that costs $60, $70 a piece.
Oh,
Yeah,
course,
that's why they took
course.
PS2 backwards compatibility out of the PlayStation 3 when it came out, because people were buying more PlayStation 2 games than PlayStation 3 games, and they wanted people to move on to the next generation. The problem with that is that the reason people weren't buying PS3 games wasn't because they just wanted to play their PS2 games, it was because they weren't releasing good games. And this is a very Sony thing. Like, there's no question in my mind that, I mean, and it may sound like a cynical answer, but as far as I'm concerned, the only reason there's zero backwards compatibility with the PlayStation 4, besides backwards compatibility with PlayStation 3 stuff being a nightmare, because then you have to replicate the Emotion engine, which was a nightmare to begin with.
Sure.
Even on an emulation perspective. But this is Sony we're talking about. They have some money. They have at least $45 in their bank accounts. This is Sony we're talking about. So they don't exactly make much money outside of PlayStation and Spider-Man. In fact, I'm pretty sure by 2018, Sony will just be called Spider-Man. But anyway,
We can, yeah, Walkmans aren't really doing the bang up business that they used to.
They're not?
no,
Oh,
not so
man.
much.
Fuck.
But getting to your earlier point about the whole emulating earlier games, and to kind of expand on what I was saying earlier, not that it wasn't ridiculously expansive enough, but emulating the earlier games, and the reason, there's very specific reason.
Your glasses again, Chris.
Oh, my apologies. What Dean was talking about was all right. So he said he emulated Super Punch Out just fine, and then when he went to go play Super Mario RPG, that was turning into a problem. Super Mario RPG, and this happened a lot in the Super NES era. It happened a lot more in the NES era. But what you used to be able to do with game consoles before they were on CDs, and this is why PlayStation games are easier to emulate, because the disc is the disc. It has the information on it, and the system runs it, and that's the end of the story.
There's no
With
additional chip on the disc.
Exactly. With cartridge systems, they were able to add hardware to individual games and make the system do things it wasn't originally designed to do. Give the system more memory, all that kind of crazy stuff, which is why Nintendo 64 stuff can be difficult to emulate. That involved using the expansion pack that gave it the extra RAM, because if you make a Nintendo 64 emulator, you then need to incorporate all this whole extra process. And that a lot of that has to do with the old games not working. Super Mario RPG used a different chipset. Star Fox used obviously like the Super FX chip. Super Mario World 2, the FX2 chip, and on and on and on. Even games like Castlevania 3 and Castlevania 2, especially when you look at the American versions versus the Japanese versions had a whole different FM sound kind of thing going on with the Famicom, the disc system, and all that other jazz. A lot of really interesting stuff, but that's what makes all that emulation stuff more difficult. And one of the things I appreciate about the way Nintendo runs their virtual console service is that they don't release games until they work, which is one of the reasons for their slow schedule in the first place, was that they test the shit out of these games to make sure that they're going to function properly on the systems. The problem that I'm having is when you get to, say, the Wii U Virtual Console for NES games, they have this Virtual Console emulator that they process the games through and make them run, and they run on a technical level flawlessly. The problem is that they don't play well. This filter that they're running the games through kind of adds a bit more of a smooth angle to things, which I can imagine somebody who doesn't understand things would look at and say, well, that's not so bad. But if you look at it next to what the game should look like with clear, crisp corners, then you realize that no, this does not look good. So if you look at it on your own, it actually doesn't look too bad. But if you look at it next to something else, or if you've played a lot of Virtual Console stuff on Wii as opposed to Wii U, it's going to look bad. And then you can't go back because all these sharp angles are now slightly out of focus, and the button lag is very ridiculous. But button lag is going to vary from television to television. So I'm sure if I had one of the nice HD monitors that say they use in Evo tournaments, the button lag wouldn't be so bad. But the button lag's still going to be there, especially because this NES emulation, what I was talking about with even on the gamepad screen or even on a 3DS, there is button lag where there is no excuse to be. And that stuff makes me angry. But then again, also going to another thing you brought up, Dan, with these older games, and there's experiences you're just not going to be able to have. A lot of that's going to come down to rights. I mean, a lot of modern games are made with these kinds of things in mind. It's kind of like rights with TV shows, where the TV shows now have things like the DVD rights or the streaming rights negotiated at the time of their creation, which is also involved in a lot of video game stuff. Now, all that stuff is involved when they conceive of the game in the first place, but it wasn't even nobody could have even imagined the kind of digital marketplace that exists these days back when these games were created. So if the company that made the game doesn't exist anymore, that game is lost. It's like trying to get Disney and Capcom to band together to put DuckTales 2 or even the original NES DuckTales on other consoles. The rights are tied up in so many different holders that there's no way that anyone's going to be able to make enough money off of these $5-6 releases to make it worth anyone's while. I mean, look at something like GoldenEye, which is a licensing nightmare. That game's never going to come out on anything because Nintendo has a stake in it, Rare has a stake in it, who's now owned by Microsoft, and whoever owns the Bond license at the time. I mean, Electronic Arts had it for a long time, which is why we got that GoldenEye remake with all the Daniel Craig stuff in it, because they couldn't use anything tied to the original movie because of all the rights issues that were hung up everywhere. So I do appreciate that retro game emulation is a very difficult thing to do. Especially when you get into weirder things like the Sega Saturn and the rat's nest that was the innards of that system. But on that same token, it has already been done right on the Wii. They did it right the first time, and they're not doing it right the second time, and that's what annoys the shit out of me. And what Dan's saying about the backwards compatibility being stripped out of the PlayStation 4, having that stuff available at launch. Sure, the PlayStation 3 stuff, that's fine. And the fact that Sony's made all these proprietary chipsets in their systems to make them to make them quote unquote more powerful, but in the end made them a little bit more difficult to program for, and thusly not making them as future proof as they should have been. That stuff annoys the crap out of me too. I mean, Microsoft kind of gave up on a lot of original Xbox backwards compatibility, and a lot of that stuff's going to very quickly get lost in time because there's already a ton of original Xbox games, granted maybe not some of the best ones, but game experiences nonetheless that cannot be had on modern game systems because who has a working Xbox anymore? Better yet, who has an Xbox anymore? Those aren't all that common. I mean, I'm sure you can buy one for cheap, but 10, 15 years down the road, where are these games going to be? And because there doesn't seem to be that sort of nostalgia for original Xbox as there is for, say, something like the Sega Saturn or even the Nintendo 64, or heck, look at the 3DO. I mean, nobody's emulating 3DO games. There's interesting games on that system that there's no other way to play besides on the consoles themselves. And that's where I look to things like the Retron 5 with obviously Hyperkin has its fair share of problems with the way they've handled the Retron 5 from a marketing standpoint. From a basic tech standpoint, I think it's a wonderful service that these any of the cartridges that you can find for all these old consoles are being able to be played on a television via an HDMI cable. Now, not having been able to find a damn thing myself, I can't tell you how the button lag works on those things, which is my number one question relating to that, because I have no gripe with emulating games and running them through different processes because I have most of those cartridges in the basement, but I am a very small percentage of the population that has an obscene video game collection. And what I want more than anything in the world would be able to get a Retron 5 and get a couple of multi-game carts, plug them all in, and there it is. There's my game library that I can play in HD on my fancy new television in a very good manner. Obviously, things like light gun games aren't going to necessarily work because of the HD TVs don't work with classic light guns, but keep a CRT in the basement. They don't take up that much space. Um,
I would disagree with that
Yes,
completely
true.
out of hand.
CRTs, by definition, take up just about all of the space. They're
They take
terrible.
up every inch they can.
As much as they conceivably can. But when you look at some of these older gaming experiences that involve rights issues, that becomes a real thing. I mean, there's a lot of really disappointing stuff that's never going to get ported to anything. And one of the biggest omissions is like the old Rare stuff. Back when Rare was just at the top of their game, when they were a phenomenal developer in the NES, Genesis, and Super NES eras, there's a lot of great games that are never going to get ported because of the current state of that company and the weird rights issues that are tied up with the games that Nintendo published that were developed by Rare, or like the NES version of Marble Madness. That's never going to get ported to anything because that game was published by Milton Bradley, for crying out loud. And they're not going to, give any sort of distribution rights to Rare in order to distribute the NES version of Marble Madness, which who's going to seek that out when the arcade version exists? Except for people who played the NES version of Marble Madness more than the arcade one and know that game and want to re-experience that specific version of it. And we're losing a lot of that stuff, especially if it's not on one of the big major consoles, which is why I hope that companies like Hyperkin, if obviously the Retron 5 has been a huge success for them because they can't make enough to sell to demand, or they don't make enough to sell to demand. I don't know what crack they're smoking at that company, but regardless of that, this system has a USB port. This system has opportunities for expansion. And if this system can be created with a theoretical expansion that will allow you to play Nintendo 64, TurboGrafx 16, take it a step further, and things like Magnavox Odyssey, Atari 800, a lot of these cartridge type things that are not available to be played in any way, shape, or form besides emulation, but through any sort of legal means. Something that would be able to just find those cartridges, which are essentially indestructible, and be able to preserve them in a more meaningful way. I mean, there's just something about playing a game on a system as opposed to playing an emulator, and it's my sincerest hope that this kind of stuff gets fixed. I mean, I'm looking at my screensaver here that just kind of flashes through all these screens, and the Atari 2600 version of California Games popped up, and I used to play the crap out of that, but. Where is Epix now? Where is legally? Where does California Games sit? I mean, the last release I saw of that was on the Wii Virtual Console, but it was the Commodore 64 version of it, and all that stuff's been yanked from the Virtual Console because I don't know, maybe it didn't sell enough. I don't know why that stuff's not available on VC, but it's not there anymore. So now there's no legal way to go out and play California Games for Atari 2600. And that kind of bothers me, besides going out and finding the cartridge in a working Atari. And then you have to hook it up to a CRT because hooking up an Atari to a modern television looks like absolute garbage.
Yeah.
So,
well, and
yeah.
and again, that's what what I was trying to get at there was really that there are no legal means to play some of these games. And for the most part, like you said, who's really going out to look for the Atari 2600 version of California Games? It's probably not going to be a huge system like PS5. you can fucking play Atari 2600 game. You know what I mean? That's probably not the biggest point
Put that on the back of the
of
box.
interest. Yeah, you know, but the fact remains that there is a way to play that game, albeit illegally, but these things do exist. And I think that's where my frustration comes in of that, it's like the Batman 66 TV series that is finally coming out on DVD and Blu-ray this year because they finally figured out the rights nightmare that it was. Well, that's been on DVD at every comic convention you've gone to for the last 20 years.
True.
You know,
True.
as long as DVDs have been out, these things have been out there, but there's still this stigma attached to bootleg copies of things or emulation, even when there's no other viable alternative. And that's, again, a lot of that's where my frustration comes from. Looking at the PS4 again, I get that you can't put the PS3 games on there right away. That's not ready at launch. That's fine. The chipset was crazy, but you already have the PS2 and the PS1 emulation on the PS. There's no way you can convince me that you couldn't have got that to work on the PS4 right out of the box, so that everything I purchased on my PS3, I instantly had access to that as well.
I
And that
completely agree.
a lot of that is where my frustration comes in of you either have to give me the experience that I want or I will find the experience that I want, because it is out there. It does exist. And again, it's being done by 2 or 3 dudes, or girls. There might be the female programmers as well. I don't want to be sexist or anything, certainly, but it's being done by people in their own homes. They are writing programs that, while they may not run perfectly, I bet you if they had some Sony money behind it, they would run pretty damn perfect. So
I'm sure.
Make these things available. If there are rights nightmares, figure them out, because you know what? I guarantee you, if you do a simple search on Google, you can play GoldenEye tonight. You know what I mean? You
Not
can
well,
have,
but you can.
but you can have that up and running, and you can do the whole thing just like you did if you don't have your N64 anymore. So, and again, that's where the problem comes in. I can go do this. I would rather give you money for it, but I can do it.
Yes, you would rather.
So
I would
figure it
rather
out.
pay for a safe and fully functioning version of that than take my risk with emulation, risk downloading some kind of malware, and risk it falling apart, because that's going to happen a lot with emulators.
Yeah.
There's so many different factors that can be that have to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, and again, I think it is an interesting conversation, because I think, Dean, you brought up a good point of the cost versus return aspect of, what do we really want to spend money on to get this functionality? Are we really worried that people can't play TNC surf designs on their system? Is that really going to be a thing? But the fact is that there is a market out there for it. There are ways to do it. Give people access to the things that they want in the manner in which they want them, or, as we have seen in every single industry, and really the whole thing kind of started with Napster, back in the early 2000s, the evil MP3, sites and all that shit. Give people what they want, or they're going to find a way to get it any damn way,
No, you're right. You're right. And I mean, another thing is, if it comes down to hardware, controllers are available via USB. I have a whole arsenal of controllers for every system you could ever want. I have a Genesis one, Sega CD. I have a Super Nintendo. I have a Nintendo 64 controller that hooks up USB, which is impressive because I didn't think that would ever function correctly, but it does.
But it does, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a bad spot for these companies, because I understand it's a huge undertaking to do something like this, but I mean, to be honest, a lot of the times I don't, a library isn't large enough when these systems first come out, or I mean, hell, even a year down the line after they come out, where I'm going to be totally, into the new games. So why not give us some of the other stuff to play, which I think is feasible.
Look at the PS4 and the Xbox One, and I can't speak to the Wii U library now, but if you look at the PS4 and the Xbox One library, what are you buying?
No,
The
you're right.
systems
You're
have been
totally
out
right.
since November. What are you buying on those? On PS4, the only game that you should have purchased, and I'm a big Sony fanboy. I love my PlayStation, always have. But the main game that I should have purchased, and I didn't even play this yet, is Infamous. I still haven't played it. That's the only big game that I should have played so far. You know, other than that, The Last of Us Remastered just came out. I played that on my PS3. You know, this is an upscaled version, and I'm sure it looks better, and I'll probably play through it again, and actually finish it this time. And I'll get to it eventually. But really, what are the games?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean Sony's kind of sort of dropping the ball here with their PlayStation Now stuff. I'm not going to get into that. We could talk about that at perhaps maybe next week because it is interesting. But yeah, I've these new systems. They're sort of turning their back on what possibly made them what they are today, and it's somewhat upsetting because I would love to go back and play some of the older games that I remember, but, you can't pop them into the system. You can't download them. And if, what else am I supposed to do at that point, right?
You
Well,
can
yeah,
with the Wii
and
U. The
Yeah.
Wii U
Yeah.
is 100% backwards compatible with Wii software, and I appreciated the shit out of that because that meant that the moment the Wii U showed up in my house,
You got stuff
I
to
could
play.
retire my Wii,
Yeah. Yeah.
and and
yeah,
and I could
and
just
that was the biggest selling point of the PS2. When the PS2 came out, I mean, they
absolutely.
marketed the shit out of the fact that, look, you've already got a library of games you can play. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah, and I mean,
Yeah.
that generation, was there any other system that could do that? PS2 ever? No, because that was direct competitors were the Xbox and the GameCube. So obviously, N64 games couldn't pop into a GameCube, and Xbox was brand new on the scene. So yeah, this system had a full library of games, easily probably going over, I'd say, 1,000 games that could just pop into the system at any point in time, anytime you wanted something to do.
Nintendo's been riding that train with the Game Boy for forever. Game Boy Color played Game Boy games. Game Boy Advance played Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. Hell, the DS played Game Boy Advance and Game Boy Color games for crying out loud.
Yeah,
They
Yeah, I
they
I
kept that
still
gravy
play.
train going.
I
yeah,
still play Tetris on my Game Boy Advance SP. The reason I have a Game Boy Advance SP is so that I could, well, one, because it was the limited edition Nintendo paint job, because
Oh,
that
I
thing's
love
just
that
pretty
thing.
cool.
Yeah, that thing's cool.
But two, that's what I play Tetris on to this day. The Tetris that I got with my original Game Boy 25 years ago,
And
that game still works, still fires up every single time.
talk about doing things right. The 3DS has that exact version of Tetris available for download
oh
for
yeah,
like
and
a
it's
couple of
it's
bucks.
it's fucking perfect.
Original Game Boy Tetris is fully available for download on the 3DS Virtual Console. And I will say that Nintendo gets this right in so many instances. My only gripe is the way that they've handled the NES emulation, and it's a simple fix for them. I mean, a relatively simple fix. They just need to update what the software does because they have an emulation program that runs all these games the same way. They just need to fix what that program is, make it more like it was on the original Wii, and add the save states to that. Take the best of both worlds, mash them together, make it as good as they've done. Their Game Boy Advance emulation's got freaking visual filters you can flip through. Like there's a couple of different visual filters. There's screen size alterations. And the 3DS Virtual Console, if it's an original Game Boy game, you can swap it to the original creamed spinach color and include the motion blur so it looks just like it did on your Game Boy. It's nuts that this stuff has gotten so much attention. And I mean, geez, Sega did an amazing job with their Game Gear emulation on the 3DS as well, with all the different options you have. And with something like the NES, which has some of Nintendo's most important and sellable games, and the way that it's gotten so much positive attention on the eShop, like Virtual Console games get the exact same real estate on the eShop as everything else does. You can find Earthbound sitting right next to Assassin's Creed 3 in the eShop, like just with equal amount of attention. It's brilliant. And the fact that they haven't fixed just this last hurdle is mind-boggling to me. It's just take all that stuff. Granted, you can play it on the console, but make it less cumbersome. Make it easy for me. Make it so that I don't have to switch my Wii U into a entire different mode in order to access these things. But
Yeah,
guys, we're
and
going
it's
long.
Yeah.
We
yeah.
should really wrap this up. This has been a fascinating topic. I hope it's been interesting to listen to because I know I tend to drone on when it comes to topics I'm passionate about. So hopefully this has been interesting for folks to listen to. But final thoughts, go around the room. Dean.
Yeah, I would have to agree that Nintendo does it the best, and they've been doing it the best for a very long time. Whether you want to talk about backwards compatibility between new systems and old systems, or the virtual console stuff, they've been doing it the best, and I hope they do get their stuff together with the NES emulation. But besides that, they just need to keep up the good work, because if you want to talk about, features or pluses to the Wii U, virtual console stuff and backwards compatibility is certainly front and center on that system. That's something that the Xbox One and the PS4 cannot tout at this moment, nor do I think they ever will. And that's what makes Nintendo unique, is that they put this kind of care and love into this type of stuff. As far as emulation goes, do it at your own risk. It might not run right. Again, if you want to do it legally, own the game first physically, and then you could download it, however many times you want on as many computers as you want. That's how I enjoy some of my older games, because to be honest, I don't want to, mess up the teeth or anything. I really don't even want to take them out of the box sometimes, especially some of my more prized possessions. So, yeah, that's what I got to say about that.
Dan, what you got?
I I can see how this topic may seem like sort of a strange thing for people to feel somewhat passionately about, but for me, really, what drives the point home on why this is such an important thing is that we kind of live in this world now where the things that we are excited about as far as modern gaming experiences are concerned. If you look back at this past year's E3, hell, for every system, there were 3 games that were coming out in 2014. So looking at that, it's everything used to be at E3. This is the game that's coming out, and you can play it next week. And isn't that amazing? Right. And now we kind of live in this world where, because of the size of the games, by the virtue of the undertaking of making some of these games, they're going to continue to get delayed and pushed. And this is something that these companies should have figured out. Yes, Nintendo does it well. Nintendo or Microsoft and Sony need to figure this out as well. They need to get on the ball, because they are losing a huge portion of of their audience to the fact that these experiences are not available. And I think we may finally be entering the time where PlayStation 1 games, and maybe not the original Xbox, because I think they only made Halo and Halo 2. I think those were the only 2 games that came out for that system.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Panzer Dragoon, man.
Oh yeah,
Panzer Dragoon Orta.
Orta, yeah. But I think we're finally getting to a point where some of these games on the PlayStation 1 especially can be considered classic gaming. Right?
I would
These
hazard to
should
guess
be
that
up
they are.
there with Super Mario Brothers 3 and with Sonic. Some of these games that are out, Metal Gear Solid belongs in that same sort of pantheon. So give people the opportunity to experience that on their shiny new console as well.
Excellent point. The only thing I'm gonna say is that, and this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, is that this is a relatively young industry, the video game industry, when compared to other mediums, and the fact that we have already lost games, we've already lost stuff. It's just not out there anymore. There's so much unknown about the early years of this industry, and it's so strange that this happened, that so much stuff disappeared. I mean, there's still Atari ROMs showing up that people have found that nobody knew about. There's all this stuff that's just been lost to history. And I mean, not to overly plug my own stuff, but I do have a series of articles on Geek Life called Lost in Time that focuses on games that are lost in time. They are not commercially available in any way, shape, or form. And I like shining spotlights on those games because I feel like it's important that some of these experiences don't get forgotten and don't get lost in time, because there's I can't remember if I was talking about it on the podcast or if I was just talking about it with somebody. I was cataloging my NES games because I'm a giant nerd, and I'm cataloging the games and I'm finding these label variants, and there nobody has these cataloged. There's all these different covers for Atari games, and there is no definitive list out there that says this is every version of this game available. This is what their boxes looked like. This is what goes with what. There is no definitive list of that stuff available. And I find that very troublesome, that you can go on eBay and people will be selling a quote unquote complete copy of Super Mario World that has a box and then a cartridge and a manual. But the cartridge and the manual don't match the box because the cartridge and the manual were the versions of the game that came with the system as opposed to the one that was sold separately, which have different labels on them. And the fact that this stuff isn't properly cataloged somewhere in some major database just drives me mad, especially when I'm cataloging my stuff and I see that I have a copy of Bubble Bobble with the original round black Nintendo seal of approval, and then a second copy with the more common oval gray Nintendo seal of approval, and I can't find an image of the box art for one as opposed to the other. Like the only one that's out there is the oval one. There is no round black one. Why can't I find that? Why isn't there a scan of that somewhere? Why isn't this stuff being preserved? And it may seem minute, but I think it's important. I think it's important. And I think that all this emulation stuff that's out there, the fact that these ROMs exist, and the fact that companies are starting to look back and find new ways to digitize these older games is incredibly important. And you should look at them. You should buy the old games. You should tell these people, vote with your dollars and say, I'm willing to spend money on these great classic games because they're super fun, and that's the way we're going to get more of them. And with that, we're going to call it a night. We're going to skip plugs this week. Besides, I'm going to give Dean a quick moment to talk about the telethon thing that he's doing because it's really, really impressive. And so we're just going to go ahead and do that now. Dean, talk to us.
All right, so I mean, I mentioned it, I believe, on the Geek Philosophers, or maybe last week on the Stone Age Gamers, just very briefly, but I'll talk about it a little bit more this week. We are planning this huge marathon for this little boy named Martin, who is battling leukemia right now, and the family is very tight with money. You know, they already have another child. It's a single mother. So they're doing their best to keep the boy comfortable, but he's a big video game fan, and what we want to do is we're going to do a 48-hour marathon for him Saturday, August 9th into August 10th. So we'll be starting at 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, August 9th, going to August the next day, 48 hours, August 11th. So we're doing all of Saturday, all of Sunday, and then an hour on Monday night. That's when we'll be ending. We're going to be playing all types of different games, multiplayer, single player. Chris is going to come in and prove his awesomeness by defeating all three Punch-Out games. That's regular Punch-Out, Super Punch-Out, and Punch-Out on the Wii. We'll be playing a bunch of Dota, Team Fortress, some Hearthstone. We got a whole mess of single-player games lined up that we're going to be... I'll be up almost the entire time. If I'm not there, Arya or Chris will be, and I promise you it'll be a fun time. Everything will be through our Twitch. We're not handling any of the money ourselves. This is going directly to the family, so, this is for a good cause. Tell your friends, get the word out there. Have people watch. Even if you're not going to watch, go to the link and donate. It means a lot, and the kid's fighting hard for his life. The leukemia is a very serious disease, and while this might not be for research, this is to save a young boy who could have a future doing anything. I mean, he's 10 years old. He could be a doctor later on. So, to give him a future is something that we all want to try and help with. So, if you can spare some time or even spare $1 or $2, anything helps. Swing by the website that is www.twitch.tv/geek G33K_life LIFE. It'll be a lot of fun. We're gonna be doing a few giveaways and everything too. I managed to pull some stuff together. So, if you're there, great. We're happy to have you. Hang around in the chat. We'll have actual moderators in the chat the entire time, too, so there will always be someone to talk to. I will have all your words funneled to me as well. People will be telling me what you are saying, so fear not, I will see it. And we're very appreciative of all the donations beforehand, even if I'm too tired to say it. Believe me, from the bottom of my heart, we're all very grateful. And hopefully we can make something happen here. And that's it.
All right, sounds good. As always, you can send us emails, hit up the contact us link on geeklife.com, G33KLIFE.com. Subscribe to us on iTunes. Make sure you give us some 5-star ratings and tell us what you like or don't like. But anything you can do to help get the word out about the shows, gets us more listeners, gets us more listener mail, all that other jazz. So with that, we're going to sign off. I'm going to go the heck to bed, and we'll talk to you again next week. Have a good night. I don't necessarily want to pay them more money for that game on the go.
But yo, dog, I heard you like Blaster Master, so I put some Blaster Master in your Blaster Master.
I don't know what any of that meant.